Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And welcome to session one of our Championing Gen AI webinar series. I'm Noah Flaherty. I'm super excited to have you all here today. And today we're going to be diving into something that we've likely all done a bit of, and that's figuring out how to take those big AI ideas and turn them into actual working prototypes that we later plan to then go and productionize. So I'm TTO, co-founder of Vellum, and I'll be guiding you through both today's session as well as the other two sessions in our three-part series. We have a really exciting lineup here today. Today, of course, we'll be talking about turning AI ideas into working prototypes. And I'm joined by Lior Solomon and Pratik Bhatt from Drata, which I'm super excited to have with me here. And we have two other sessions coming up in the following weeks. So if you haven't signed up for those already, please do. Our second session next week will be about building trust in your AI systems and evals. And the third and final session will be about launching your AI products smoothly and making changes once they're live. But today, I want to make sure that we're all able to maximize our experience. So, stay curious, have fun. We want things to be interactive. So please go ahead, and if you feel comfortable, introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know what AI projects you're working on or any challenges you might be facing in bringing your AI systems to life. If you have questions, that's awesome. Please go ahead and drop them in the chat or the QA box. We'll tackle them towards the end of this webinar, maybe the last 10, 15 minutes, and nothing's off limits, so please ask away. This webinar might be hosted by Vellum, but we are here to talk AI, whether it's with or without our product. So please, please, please share your questions and experiences there. I will say the session's being recorded, so no worries if you miss out on anything. If you have to step away or if you want to later share this with coworkers, no worries. We'll send this recording afterwards. We'll shoot an email. We'll include the recording. We'll include some resources. We'll include the slide deck, and you'll be able to refer back to any of this content. But, without further ado, with a little more further ado, I should talk a little bit about Vellum. We are an AI product development platform, and our goal is to help application layer companies turn AI ideas into AI-powered features that can be trusted and taken to production. So we help provide tools for experimentation, testing, deployment, and monitoring, and really are kind of that end-to-end AI development platform. But more importantly, I'm joined by Lior and Pratik from Drata. And we're going to talk about how Drata's brought some of their AI ideas into the prototyping stage. But I'll let them kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit about Drata before we dive into the discussion. Lior?
Hey, everyone. Really excited to be here. Thank you, Vellum, for actually inviting us. So yeah, maybe I'll start a little bit about myself. I'm the VP of Data at Drata. I'm helping with all the initiatives in regards to, all the way from data engineering, data analysis, and the AI development at Drata, and doing it together with my partner in crime, Pratik. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, everybody. Excited to chat with everyone today. I'm on the product team here at Drata and really excited to work with Lior and the data and AI team as we build out more use cases.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And Lior, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just for context for people in the crowd here, what is it that Drata does? And at a really high level, how is AI being used there today?
Absolutely, yeah. So Drata is a compliance automation platform. It helps companies to actually connect all their systems to our platform, and we continuously just monitor all their controls and all their compliance needs on a nightly basis, continuously just running those tests for them, and kind of like alleviating all the manual work that needs to be done by most of the traditional compliance teams. So we're trying to help companies just focus on the products they build while we're building the trust with the aspect of security and compliance. We are the fastest growing company in the world of compliance. I'm very proud to be part of this team. Never seen in my life seeing a company growing so fast and adopting so many customers. We live and breathe automation. That's like what that's what we really kind of care about, and helping our customers automate everything. So when it comes to the AI angle, it's definitely kind of aligns to that kind of perspective. And we actually, most of our, I would say, AI initiatives are within that mindset. How can we alleviate some of the cognitive load on those GRC teams or kind of like compliance teams, and help them kind of streamline the work they're doing, considering the fact that most of the compliance work is very related to text, a lot of text. So definitely AI and Gen AI plays along with that.
Thank you, Lior. Yeah, you're missing the Vellum logo from here. If you're a Vellum customer, or if you're looking at us and we need to fill out some security questionnaires, chances are we'll do that with AI through our Drata-powered policies and security documents. So it's really cool stuff. Cool. Well, let's talk about what we're going to be discussing today. So we'll go into a bit about Drata's AI discovery process, like, how did you know that you needed to use AI? How did you know that it could actually create real business value as opposed to just be like shiny tech to try out? Then we'll talk about building proof of concepts and how to validate those ideas quickly, especially when engineering resources might be scarce and it's hard to advocate for something that hasn't yet proven itself. We'll also talk about developing AI features with security and privacy in mind, which is of course very relevant to a company like Drata. We'll talk about the collaboration between product and engineering and how different teams within an org all have roles to play in good AI product development. And then finally, we'll touch on how to scale AI features beyond just prototypes and how to actually get some real value out of them by baking AI features into the product. So that's the game plan today. If you're in the audience and you have things that you're hoping for in particular, feel free to add them in the chat and we can touch on those as we go. Cool. Well, enough of slides. I'm hoping most of this webinar is just a good old discussion between the three of us here. So I've prepared some questions that I would love to ask both you, Lior, and Pratik. So let's start with the basics. When and how did Drata realize that AI was going to be a core part of your strategy, and how did you first approach discovering what product and what features made sense to build with AI?
Yeah, I can maybe start. I think actually we started that journey and started looking at all those kind of AI, Gen AI kind of articles being posted out there as somewhere in February last year, I would say. Tracking very closely some of the back then we were looking into the OpenAI releases. As we just kind of got a lot of hype online, we started to think about hypothesizing how that's going to blend into automation in our world and helping the compliance team to actually use it out. I remember the first actually demo or POC I was working on is actually trying to answer security questionnaires using AI. It was I remember the first kind of project was, we started with a very simple kind of naive bias classifier that takes the question asked by the customer and tries to classify what sort of resources can we use to actually try and answer the question. So that was kind of the first approach, was very scrappy, trying to, and again, at that point, it's just trying to help the leadership team to see that this is not just an idea and not just a kind of a cute feature to have. It could really disrupt the whole product. If we get to the point where we can actually help customers move faster revenue at the end of the day, because it's at the end of the day, it's if my security team is bugged with so many questions coming from different potential customers, and my security team is kind of slowing down the process of the sales cycle. If we can help them alleviate that or help them kind of expedite that process, we're literally we can be directly showing these features correlated with their revenues. So that's how we started.
I think that's
Yep.
That's so crucial, using I think something that you said here, Lior, was being able to accelerate the sales cycle or attribute the benefit of AI to real business value. I think one thing that we see a lot of in the industry is there's so much hype around AI that people, it is exciting, don't get me wrong, but they reach it's solution in search of problems sometimes, right? And starting with a really solid problem, such as how can we accelerate sales cycles, or how can we automate a process that's driven by humans today, I think is I'm curious to get your take on that, but that's something that we see as being very successful when you think about adopting AI.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that discipline, it's really about a discipline to be able to actually, kind of clean up the fluff around like also like shiny objects and unicorns out there with like things you can do, and actually distill it to be able to correlate directly to what would it influence, what sort of needle I'm trying to move, what sort of like clear business objectives I'm trying to actually influence. And that's how we started back then with that. It was like just getting to the point that I remember just like even just like crappy Streamlit app that shows I can run a question and get answers, and eventually that's kind of what we presented on. I remember it was an ELT meeting, just like a leadership kind of all hands. I presented that and it was like really impactful. Just a realization of like, wow, that could be really something substantial. And then it was actually, I have to point out, and kudos to you guys on the Vellum side, where you actually, I think Akash was the one, Akash, the CEO of Vellum, reached out to me. You guys are our customers, and he reached out to me with a Loom kind of video showing, hey, here's how we're using Drata to actually answer questionnaires automatically using AI. And that moment was like, okay, that's like, seems like we're on the same page.
Yeah, we still use that demo in sales calls today, funnily enough. That's been a really helpful demo data set.
Yeah, that's
super
how
cool.
we actually started those discussions. Yeah.
Okay, so
Mhm.
so you start with like a real problem. You pick like what needle it is that you want to move. Once you've identified that, like, is it pretty easy to convince other people in the organization that that's a problem worth solving, or that AI is the right way to solve that problem? Does that require a lot of like persuasion, or like requires building a case, or is it like pretty straightforward? How do you navigate kind of the coalition building of, hey, we need to solve this problem and AI is the right way to do it?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think there's a lot that goes into that. No, I think the first is, I think Lior and I are very fortunate that at our company, there's a lot of excitement about adopting new technologies and just willingness to learn and adapt. And so I think that's all, great from a cultural standpoint. So that's really important on our end, to feel supported, and having that creative freedom to be able to explore things is really important. The second is when you asked about getting buy-in or being able to prioritize, I think this goes back to blending AI development with how we approach product development as a company. And the first piece is educating both internal folks, but also even our customers about what value we can create. I think as Lior and I are building very early on, we were just kind of playing around with the tool here and there. We were extremely excited because we could very quickly build and see the use of some of these tools. And I think that can translate very easily to things like leadership. Like Lior mentioned, a key step in our process is building a quick POC to showcase value immediately to whoever we're trying to show this to. So that's really important, is showing real value is a huge differentiator when we're building with AI. And I think the piece after that is really breaking down the capabilities of what AI can bring to a feature today. I think summarization is probably the first one that everyone thinks of, because that's just what a lot of people are releasing as a first step. But there's so much more that Gen AI can enable for a lot of companies today. And as we continue to explore those, it's really a cultural and educational process we're trying to do internally, where we're showcasing how we're thinking through ideas, breaking down how we look at things from a different perspective, and also talking about how the way we've approached traditional software development are not too dissimilar, and a lot of that can carry on pretty effectively to building with AI today. So it's really a combination of art and science in that.
That's cool. Like, we see that quite a bit too, where people will reach towards like the latest hype wave of use cases in AI, right? Like, first it was like generating blog posts or generating emails. Then it was like chatbots, and chatbots are still very much here to stay, at least for a while. Now it's like agents, and I think one thing that I see is that there's just so many use cases, a lot of which frankly are like pretty mundane, but super, super valuable. Data extraction being a really common one, starting with like natural language and being able to pull out structured JSON that conforms to some schema. I guess, like, what are the genres of use cases that you've seen a lot of success with, Pratik? And maybe they stack. Maybe it's different tasks that all work together. Like, maybe there's a summarization step and a data extraction step, and together they're combined into some end feature. Like, what are the types of tasks that you found AI to be great for today?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I'd break that up into two sessions, like you mentioned. kind of one-off tasks that you touched on, and then multi-step kind of workflows that we're now building towards. For those one-off use cases, the first that comes to mind is obviously going to be summarization. I think that's what these GPTs are so great at doing, is taking a large form of content of information and being able to output information pretty fluently and feeling very natural. So summarization is always the first use case that we know we can provide value with, and that's been tested on our end. The other areas we've been looking to branch into are things like object classification that involves a lot of unstructured text. I think with traditional machine learning development, when you're building a classifier, doing that on unstructured data is extremely tough today, and it's not the most efficient for most organizations. But with Gen AI, when you have a ton of unstructured data, that can actually be unlocked from a development perspective as well. So object classification is one. We have content generation, which is what we've seen a lot of folks doing. So we just launched our security question automation feature into beta. That's a great example where we are retrieving relevant information and we're generating answers to questions that are coming into our customers. So content generation is a huge aspect that I think will unlock a lot of value for our customers. And there's also things like code generation and task automation that we're seeing more and more use cases get built towards. So as we go to those latter halves, I think it touches on what you mentioned, is building multi-step workflows instead of having those one-off use cases. Like there's a little bit of summarization involved. There's also a little bit of entity extraction. There's also a little bit of content generation. There's also a little bit of code generation. There's all of that kind of pieced together. And that's really where the excitement comes in, at least for me. And there are, I'd love for you to add to this, is like when you can have those multiple pieces and put those together to build something great, it's really where you start to see the value of these AI projects come in.
Absolutely. I think like one failure mode that we see people make when they first pick up AI is they, try to get one big prompt that like does it all, right? It's like they're trying to extract data, they're trying to apply tone of voice, it's like doing reasoning, and more we see breaking down these complex problems into smaller problems to be much more effective. And typically that means like one prompt per small problem, and then like a synthesis prompt that brings them all back together. And it's actually, I went to a talk and it was very similar to what the presenter was talking about, which is like, it's how humans think and it's how humans approach a problem, right? Like you don't try to like think about some massive complex problem all at once. You like kind of decompose it and think step by step and reason about the issue. And I'm curious to hear whether or not this resonates, but building AI, like you kind of want to take a step back and be like, how would I as a human do this? What information would I need at my disposal? What would I have to read through? What questions would I have to answer? And from that, like what output do I then generate? If you can't, as a human, do that, like it's pretty unreasonable to expect AI to do that. That's my take. What do you guys think?
I think, maybe just to add to that, I think there's another portion of like trust overall. Like trust is a key value for us as a company. And I think anyone that handles, worked with data in the past understand that this value. But in order to build trust with your stakeholders, you need to make sure that you're taking baby steps and building that kind of relationship with them. So that same thing goes into AI as well. We want to make sure as we start those like early stages of like early adoption of AI, we didn't want to take a lot of risk. We want to make sure that there's no chance on earth that there's going to be any risk in terms of security compliance for our customers when we try those new technologies. So that's kind of like, imagine that was the equation we would take, right? Take something that seems like very, very kind of like contained. You can monitor it properly. What's going to be the implication of it when you use it. What can go wrong? Like, just like trying to kind of like look at all the aspects of that. And then as you kind of like successfully deliver those solutions, slowly take a little bit more risk, but being very transparent and over communicating, like what does it mean? Like what am I doing when we launch this feature? What sort of like data assets are being included? Can I, as a customer, can control that? Can I say no? I don't want to participate in this feature, and so on and so forth. So these are like we indexed a lot into those sort of aspects. I think which are not only related to specifically AI. These are like rule of thumb when you use data overall.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, Lior, because I think that's the first thing we do when we think of any project is before we start breaking it down, because Lior knows this, I get excited pretty quickly, so I love jumping into something, but we've really, made this a part of our DNA where the first thing we do is let's look at this from a data and privacy standpoint to make sure we're, maintaining our trust with customers and our data, and we're being, proper partners with them. And then once we're satisfied with that piece, I think, Noah, to your question, when we talk about breaking down a problem, whether we're thinking about how a human would do it versus not, I think it's really a combination of both. The first thing is, yes, I think there are elements that we could think about. How do we break this problem down into smaller chunks? Just like how a developer would tackle any problem, is how do you make it into sizable chunks that you can address individually and piece those together? That's how humans think overall. I think an added benefit that we are noticing with GenAI today is there are some things that we can throw these models at that a human may not be able to do. For example, if you're doing a task repeatedly 100 times, that's going to take a ton of time in today. And I think those are examples where if there's a low intelligence task that you need to repeat on a really a repetitive basis or sequentially really quickly, that's something that we think LLMs can unlock for us that humans wouldn't be able to. So it's really blending those two elements together is how we think about breaking those projects down into a proper development lifecycle.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. In YC days, they talk about like do things that don't scale, right? So you might start by doing a process manually and thinking through like how is a security questionnaire answered manually today? What information does a human look like? And yeah, it's going to take a really long time, but you got to do a couple of them. And once you figure out what the steps are, then it's like automate, use AI, and refine. So that's super consistent. I'll also say like it is interesting in that as model, some new models are coming out really, really cool very recently that have like extraordinary reasoning capability. So there is an interesting tension too between models that are becoming more powerful and you can get away with doing more at once with like a single prompt versus them being slow or more expensive and still wanting to break things down to get faster speeds or lower costs. In the early days, how did you guys think about the trade-offs between like accuracy, cost, and speed of using AI? Was it a consideration? Were you just trying to get things to work, like optimize later? What was your approach there?
Yeah, we thought about that from the very start. I think that really starts with the user experience. We want to understand what the requirements for the user experience looks like, and then determine how we're going to build around that. So the very first use case that we tackled was our customers are reviewing completed security questionnaires from their vendors consistently, and those questionnaires can be hundreds of questions long. It would take a lot of time to understand and extract that information really quickly. So we had this initial idea is let's summarize the actionable and important information from a questionnaire for you using AI today. Now, like you mentioned, Noah, this was very early on, almost a year and a half ago or a year ago. And the models were very different. Like the latency was much higher, accuracy was not as great, even rate limits were lower. So there was a lot of considerations we had to take into account. And we really needed to start with, in this use case, what is the appropriate amount of time that we think a customer would be willing to wait for this information? So the first was like, let's validate that we can provide actionable information. So this involved the process of let's quickly build a POC and identify whether we can provide some sort of value here. Second is once we identified what that value was, how does that value fit within the context of that user's workflow? If we're giving you a ton of value, but you have to wait like a few minutes for it, in most cases, customers will not be willing to wait for that situation, depending on the use case. In this specific use case, anything more than a minute, we identified that customers were not the happiest with waiting for that information. And the third was setting expectations properly. So there are always going to be constraints when it comes to costs, latency and rate limits in any sort of development process. And so you really need to make sure those expectations are managed both from engineering, but also in the user experience itself. So if you're asking a user to wait for a little bit of time, let's tell them how long we expect them to wait for. Let's give them a sneak peek about what information we can extract from it. And it's funny that you mentioned, Noah, like how those models have changed over time. Actually, recently, Lior and I were going back to the very first project we worked on because we wanted to upgrade the model we were using. And it was so much faster. And in my head, I was like, I really wish this was there a year ago. This would have made my life so much easier. And it's just, honestly, it's so exciting to see these models get better because you're revisiting some of these older use cases and those constraints that you previously had almost get erased entirely in some cases. So it's really about what are the user requirements and what are the constraints you have and trying to balance both of those.
Yeah, we what we typically advise our customers is to get it to work first. And like, obviously it needs to fit within the bounds, like it needs to be economical to some degree, right? But like get it to work first, prove that you can create the user experience that you want to create, and then like if you can get away with it, like optimize for costs later. You know, you can do things like set up evals and then try to downgrade the model. You can fine tune a model if you really want to go crazy. But this kind of leads me to my next question for you, Pratik. You mentioned one of the steps in that sequence that you mentioned was building a POC and using that to validate whether or not it could actually provide the value and customer experience that you were looking for. You know, a big part of today's talk is like, how do you build a good POC? You know, for a lot of people, there's maybe a big learning curve or a large engineering investment gap, or just the blank page syndrome of how do I get started? So what goes into building a POC efficiently that still tests the hypothesis that you want to test?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first part of this comes down with let's pick an idea that we are interested in. So that first step is understanding what the problem we're trying to solve is for the user and breaking that problem down. So it really starts from a product perspective, at least with the features that we're looking into. And so go ahead, Noah.
If you wouldn't mind, Pratik, like maybe if you have an example that we could talk through, like the life cycle of an example of a specific use case, whether it's security questionnaire answers or otherwise, that might like help bring it to life for folks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can pick an example. So I mentioned we summarized security questionnaires. Another project that we are releasing, I think this week or pretty soon, is being able to extract and summarize SOC 2 reports from vendors. And so this is something that our customers can consistently do. They from a security standpoint and compliance standpoint, it's important to review the SOC 2 reports of your vendors. Those reports are 80 to 90 pages long, extremely large amount of information, extremely dense, and extremely time consuming. So from a problem standpoint, it's very clear what the problem is. And I think after having built those initial projects, it's also very, very clear that we do think AI can provide value. It's an idea of extracting the right information, summarizing it and making it actionable for the user. We've done this in a previous context. Now, how do we apply this to a new one? So from a POC standpoint, the first piece was understanding what scope of the problem we want to identify. So, SOC 2 reports are gigantic. Let's identify what information is actually important for a user to see. So this was more of a product discovery process where I would talk to customers. I would talk to the other product folks in our team who have worked in our third-party risk management module and understand what users are doing in that workflow. Okay, I look at a SOC 2 report. What information in that report are you typically looking for? What is important to you for you to take action? So like we identified things like, who is the auditor? What is the audit period? What are the subservices used? Were there exceptions noted? And what was the manager's response? And we kind of got this list of items that we wanted to extract because we know that would be helpful for the next step in the user's workflow, which is, I need to take action on this report now. So that was the product discovery process. And that's kind of what we do at Drata, regardless of AI or non-AI development.
Yeah, that's just good like product engineering, right? Like any new feature, do some discovery, talk to some customers.
Exactly. So we aren't straying away from that too much. I think now this is really where the fun happens, is when we have identified that piece. Honestly, huge props to the Vellum team, because before it was extremely hard for me to spin this up myself. I would probably be nagging Lior constantly if we didn't have a tool like Vellum. But Vellum makes it really easy for somebody like me who's like a product manager who doesn't really ship code on a day-to-day basis, and I'm not as technical as folks like Lior. But it makes it easy for somebody like me to build a workflow end-to-end without a ton of engineering help. So building, adding things like a prompt node, adding a vector, indexing information into a vector database is extremely easy for somebody like me. Retrieving that information, playing around with the different nodes, and even adding conditional nodes and code nodes, all of that is extremely approachable from a Vellum user experience standpoint. So huge props to you and your team. And that's really what unlocked the POC process for me specifically, is that in my head, I thought, okay, these are the different sections of information we want to extract. For each, let me break down that problem and piece together some of those nodes and see if it works. So it took a few days, but it's really a different combination of prompts, a different combination of search nodes that we were able to run. And actually, end to end, we got it working where I would index a SOC 2 report from a customer and run it through that workflow. And it was able to honestly pretty accurately and reliably spit out that information on a consistent basis. And so the first thing I did then was, okay, this POC is working. It's a little bit hacky because I'm uploading documents manually. It's not connected to our code base and things like that. That's fine though. The main goal here is let's provide value first. And once we were able to showcase that to the application development team, they were like, hey, this is really cool. I think we can make this, very valuable to a customer end. And then we go into the actual development process to do things like let's test this end to end. Let's think of some test scenarios that we can go around the edge cases. How does this work from a data engineering standpoint? How is this working from a latency standpoint? All those things kind of come into consideration after the POC.
Makes a lot of sense. I know, like in traditional software engineering and product engineering, like a designer might use Figma to like create a clickable, like functional prototype and like show that to customers and get feedback. And it sounds like you're using Vellum and tooling to help you basically build functional prototypes with AI to do two big things. One is like prove whether or not it's even possible to solve the problem with AI, and B, like once you've solved the problem with AI, validate that it is in fact valuable to customers. Is that accurate?
No, that's extremely accurate. I love that you brought in Figma. Actually, we use that internally for our design team and our product team use Figma, and I love creating Fig Jams. I'm a very visual person, so having that open whiteboard space, especially because I do work from home, it gives you a balance of creative freedom, but also the granularity in terms of each specific segments that you want to build. So huge props to that, to the team for you guys for emulating that experience in Vellum today, because I think that's a really hard balance to strike.
Appreciate that. And it's Leroy, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add two more things I think that are critical specifically for us on the as being a compliance automation company. One is also through the POC, making sure we have we have like a domain expert that actually after the end of the day, after we're happy or not with the POC results, we have a human in the loop, an expert that looks at what we did and actually gives us a thumbs up saying, guys, this makes sense to me as a domain expert. I think that's another thing we always make sure. And the other thing is just also while we're doing the POC, we never do it, with customer data. We do it with our own kind of like Drata data, just to make sure that, we're at least getting the checks and balances there to make sure that before we even happy with the result or not, and we start kind of working and engaging with the security team, we actually tested on our own materials.
Super cool. That makes sense. So it's interesting. Between the two of you, you've identified like kind of three personas that are involved in the AI development process. It sounds like there's like the product side, like you, Pratik, who's like identifying the problem, prototyping a solution, validating the value add to the customer. Then I assume that there's an engineering team that's like productionizing this prototype, integrating with the application, like actually hooking it up to the end user experience. And then Lior, you mentioned that there are subject matter experts that are reviewing what the AI is doing and sanity checking that it is in fact performing adequately. It's cool. I just want to point out that like trifecta pattern, sometimes the PM and SME are the same person or same team in certain orgs, but that trifecta of personas is very common across companies that we work with. Tell me about how, if at all, your internal processes has changed to like better facilitate that development process between those three parties.
Yeah, I can take that one. I think there's I would add two more personas to that list. Definitely security team, and the second one will be the legal team as well. Because we want to be very diligent in regards of does it change at all anything within our DPA? Doesn't change anything in regards of the the regulation aspect of it, and does it introduce any new kind of security risk to our stack? So we always have that we always go through that team and always make sure that even while we are hypothesizing with the idea, we have a very good understanding of what sort of data assets are going to be used in order to kind of introduce this new pipeline. So I think going back to your previous question, when it starts at the POC, we start to contain it and make it very small within our team, making sure that we can, basically fail fast and see does it, moves the needle or not. We kind of validated with our kind of a domain expert to make sure that we're actually following best practices and it makes sense. And once we get to the point where it's actually, okay, we got a thumbs up, it's prioritized, now we can start working on it. The AI team actually, we try and actually have as much as freedom as we can in regards of pushing this feature out. But our kind of productivity ends when it comes to the user experience. The user experience is delegated to the app dev team. So that's something we won't be responsible for. In an example, like setting up the UI, the flows, the kind of like, usually there's a team we work with. Pratik is the one that helps us kind of find that team, find that kind of the director or PM that will help us prioritize it with the team. So we would build everything all the way to the endpoints, that the AI endpoints we're going to expose to the backend, and we integrate that into the backend just like on the API layer. From that moment, the whole user experience just done by the kind of active team. Then when it comes to data engineering, we do have a data engineer on staff within the AI team that can help us just like, pipe, all the data from one place to another. We work very closely with the data platform team to understand which data sources should we use, to make sure that we have like clear understanding of like SLAs, SLOs, SLIs in regards of like the freshness of data, how frequently would it come in, and so on and so forth. We're trying to be very, we're trying to get better as much as possible in regards of like telemetry, in regards of anything we own. I personally prefer to be waking up at night, sometimes a little, even if I shouldn't, just to make sure that, the product that I own and the product I'm delivering, if there's something wrong with it, I want to be, aware of it. So we're investing a lot in regards of like the telemetry aspect of it. So whenever we launch something, we would sit down, we would draw on a, from a high level perspective, what sort of systems are going to be engaged, what can go wrong, what are the expected SLAs there. But in a nutshell, it's kind of goes between a data engineer, like some sort of like a machine learning engineer, product working with Pratik, coordinating with the active team and the data platform team. That's kind of like, I would say, the most of the engagement.
Yeah. I mean, it's really cool. Like, it sounds like a very cross-functional team. And because of that, I imagine, it sounds like more cross-functional than like a lot of typical, feature development. And as a result of that, I can only imagine it requires like even more like shepherd, like herding cats, or like, aligning resources, or like proving ROI. Like, is that ever a challenge? And, I think there's a pretty relevant question in the chat here, which is like, this is from Nancy. How important is it to quantify the benefits and show ROI in the case for investment? Was it more a matter of securing senior leadership stakeholder support? And where does the budget for Gen AI projects often come from? Is it the office of the CTO or from relevant business units?
Pratik, do you want to take it, or should I?
Yeah, I'd love to take that first piece on the portion about proving value and where does that come from. I think it's two ways. So one I touched on earlier was it really is cultural at the company, at least for us. I mean, Lior is a huge evangelist for this with our leadership team, and I think that's been great for us to get buy-in from top down. Brian, who's our SVP of product, and Faraz on our internal team have been really great about championing this for us and our team. And Adam and Daniel, who are our CEO and CTO as well. So we're really fortunate about that, of getting buy-in, top down about this. I think as we continue to move forward beyond just what people see online and what the hype is around, it really comes down to how are we showcasing what can be done with AI today, both from a user experience standpoint, but also tying it to business initiatives. I mean, we want to build, and I'm always excited to build things, but we want to tie it to something that the company cares about, and we want to make sure it's solving a user problem. So making sure that the POCs or ideas that we have are tied to a real problem that we know customers are facing, and an important problem is helpful. We have company OKRs that we align all of our initiatives to. So we work with our teams and our leadership team to align our AI initiatives alongside those different pillars to make sure that we're still supporting the company initiatives as we move forward. And then I think the last piece is this works for anybody that is new to a technology. I think seeing it in action is what really drives a lot of the value. Showing numbers and ROI is definitely a prerequisite, but I think, in my opinion, it just gets you a seat at the table. It's not going to make sure that your project gets prioritized. I think what gets it prioritized is getting that spark of interest or excitement that we've noticed comes from seeing like a POC or seeing a short proof of concept that can really showcase that value. So that's kind of how we approach it. We already want to touch on how organizationally we've structured that, as well as from a budget standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very disciplined in regards of like the way we actually pick what sort of like features we're going to be working on, or like how much investment we're putting into one feature versus another. We're talking about like we have literally bi-weekly meetings where we actually track the entitlement, the activation, the adoption of each one of our features. And when we identify a problem, we ask ourselves, how does that influence business metrics? And do we, and that kind of ties up to the OKRs the company focuses on addressing, let's say in the next quarter or so. So when we come up with a new hypothesis or we come up with a problem that we think we can solve, the first question would be like, where is that going to line up with that kind of like activation and adoption discussion? Can we actually easily show the impact or potential impact that we're going to be introducing with this new feature? And if the answer is yes, then the discussion goes back of like, okay, how many people do we need? How many teams are going to be involved? What are we, like we are a startup. We can't do everything. We have a lot of ideas, so we need to kind of balance it with priorities. So that's kind of like very much, like you can say that about like any other feature, not necessarily AI one. But I think in my mind, it like very much, again, you have much more weight on your opinion based on the trust you build with your stakeholders and with the company.
Absolutely.
If we deliver project number 1, project number 2, project number 3, and they're being successful continuously, then we can take a little bit more risk and you get more people to kind of support that sort of risk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. It sounds like, you guys are really lucky, or not lucky, but you've like worked really hard to develop this culture internally where you have this trust and, there is this buy-in from leadership. I would love to understand, like for people in the audience that work at companies where maybe there isn't that trust or buy-in just yet, what can they do about it? How can they like help develop that trust? Given the fact that, this webinar is titled Championing Gen AI. So I thought maybe I'd share a couple ideas of mine, and then I would love to hear from you. Some things that we've seen work really well, both internally here at Vellum and also across our customers, are one, like if you have like company hackathons, like using hackathons as a way to like build a POC that's aligned to maybe a company initiative or a company challenge and use that to generate excitement. Another one that we've seen is like, look at what your competitors are doing, right? Like if you have a competitor and they're like crushing a use case with AI, like somebody's already done that validation and made a case internally, and you can kind of short circuit that logic by looking at them. And then finally, just going above and beyond, I think there are some people that will just put in some extra hours or put in a weekend and build a POC and like just make it a passion project that they're just really, really genuinely excited about. That also happens to be really awesome for the company that they work with. So those are 3 ideas that I have. Like, is there anything that you guys might add to that?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think there's I would also add to actually have discussion. If you're not lucky to have Pratik next to you, and you don't have necessarily like a PM that helps you kind of figure out what really matters on the product side, then I guess you need to do a lot of this discovery discussions with different like product people and kind of understand what's the biggest pain point right now on the product side. And if you can find out what are those pain points, then it at least narrows down your exploration, right? It narrows down your like, what sort of areas should I be thinking about when I'm hypothesizing about like AI opportunities? If you get to that short list hand of like, here's the top 5 things that really bothers us right now from product, and then you start kind of like hypothesizing, what can I do? What can I influence with a some sort of a POC on AI? Then at least you know that when you come in with the result, there's going to be attention in the room because they're really trying hard to solve that problem. So, sorry for stating the obvious. I would definitely look into that kind of approach.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. I mean, I was actually going to say, find somebody like your counterpart. I think I'm lucky that I found Lior because it was actually a company hackathon that I had built something similar, and then Lior messaged me afterwards saying, "Hey, you're interested in this?" I'm like, "Hell yeah! Like let's talk about this." And then that's kind of what built that relationship together. But I think that's definitely step one is focusing on what you're passionate about and blending that with what you want to build is what gives you that extra spark to put in the extra mile. Because when you're if it is an uphill battle, like motivating yourself is going to be a key differentiator to make sure that you can actually deliver that. And then I think second is take bite-sized chunks. I think with a lot of these new technologies, and you're going to see competitors do a lot. Stay customer obsessed and competitor aware is kind of what our theme is at Drata especially. But let's try and take bite-sized chunks out of problems. Don't try and solve everything at once. And I think that's how you start to build trust, because like Lior said, if you can do one thing really well and you can continue to build on that, that's how you get more and more resources. I think often there are some things where you might try and shoot for the moon in that scenario, and you've overpromised and underdelivered, and that's a really easy way to lose trust, not only with your company but also with customers. So setting expectations properly and making sure that you are delivering on those is a really key first step if you don't have that cultural buy-in already.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I might add too, like, it's also great from like a learning curve perspective, right? Like by starting small, like the kind of like lessens the learning curve and the ramp on how to build good AI. But sorry to interrupt, Lior.
No, I was just about to say there's one more thing that I think really important is just the educational piece, just knowledge kind of distribution. There's a lot of there's a lot of good engineers. There's a lot of kind of like people that want to work on AI, but they just don't even get to it because they're busy with it day to day. So if you were kind of like pioneering this kind of like journey of AI within your company, you actually also took upon yourself the responsibility to kind of distribute that knowledge slowly in kind of like digestible bites of like, here's what's new in AI. And like, in Drata, we have like this kind of a Ask AI channel where people can come in and just throw posts and we can talk about them. Or, I spend sometimes working with my CTO or working with my SVP of product to actually show them some new kind of like advancements. So I think it's a lot about like, and I'm sure I'm not doing enough. I need to do more myself. But it's like, I think it's a lot about that, just like distributing that knowledge, because it's really hard to track. There's like continuous innovation around it. Even us within the AI team, like I'll be lying if I say I'll be able to. I'm kind of catching up with every single change on a weekly basis. We're trying to catch up, but
it's hard even for us.
Yep.
Cool. Final line of questioning, and then we'll kind of transition into audience questions. So, you guys have been doing this for, it sounds like a year and a half now. Two-part question, like where do you see the greatest opportunities with AI at Drata going forward? What are some of the things that you're most excited about? And what do you think it would take for even more engineering teams at Drata to like play a role in building AI-centric product features? So, sorry, three-part question.
Yeah, I think there, on that first part about talking about the future of where we think this can go, I'd love to touch on that. And then, Lior, I think you already have a lot of ideas about how we can democratize the development of AI across the company. So maybe we can split it up that way. On that first point about where we see this going, I really think the way we started the program, Noah, was let's take these low-hanging fruit projects and let's provide value. So I think a lot of what companies are doing today is AI-enabled features become this additional service that's added on top of an experience already. So you have this output, let's quickly summarize it. You have something, let's do X. It's very much a tacked on aspect of it in a lot of user experiences today. In the past 6 months and more so, I'd say, we've been taking a different approach about rethinking the entire user experience of a certain part of the application. Instead of starting with the point, how can we almost question ourselves and question the assumptions we made initially and rebuild it with an AI-first approach? And there are certain parts of the application that, Lior and I think that we can provide a lot of value in doing that in. And sometimes, honestly, it's not the most efficient to do it in some places either. So it's really a question of let's pick the right area. And then it comes down to really rethinking the user experience when it comes to building an AI native feature today. So a lot of this has to do with our testing approach, for example. A lot of our customers are using Drata to continuously monitor their applications. How can we build AI into that process from step one? And so we're continuing to think of ideas that do that on a continual basis. Information collection and analysis, that is a end-to-end process. It's not just a one-step thing. How can we introduce AI elements at the very beginning and help them through all the way to the portion of them taking action? So it really, the next step that we see in the evolution of Drata's AI program is more focused on building holistic end-to-end AI experiences with problems that we think are really time-consuming and extremely tough for customers to solve today. Areas that we think that's really we're seeing a lot in is security questionnaires. Like we mentioned, we've launched that beta really recently. Our testing and monitoring capabilities, and so much more as we continue to build. But that's a really exciting next phase that we're looking to build towards.
Super exciting.
Yeah, I think I want to add to that just the aspect of I'm really fascinated by how much of those AI opportunities are becoming mature based on our understanding of the company's ontology, if you may. like understanding the core principles of the business and the core principles of the product, and kind of realizing, it's like Drata is a fairly kind of like complex, sophisticated platform that, I think like you can talk to multiple different people within the organization where they're responsible for certain areas of the product. Each one of them has their own kind of understanding of what this does, how does it influence the whole process. I'm envisioning a process where we basically centralize that ontology and an understanding of those entities within the organization. Well, every time there's a new AI project, we won't need to stitch it end to end and prescribe each one of the steps. It's basically, imagine like basically like an AI agent in the world of compliance, where it understands all the business logic of a domain expert. So it doesn't necessarily does everything, but it will be able to have enough context that we ingested based on our knowledge in compliance to actually, move a little faster with those sort of like projects and introduce more impact.
Yep, that's cool. Super cool. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for my questions. We've answered a couple of questions as we've gone along. One quick one is, just for context for the audience, how many engineering teams are there at Drata? And how big is the AI engineering function within the broader landscape?
We're about, the AI team specifically is about 5 to 6 people, not including the data platform team, which also supports that. So I think give or take about around 12 to 15, while the whole engineering org is about, I would say, last time I looked into it, 250 or 300, along those lines.
Cool. Thanks. And to the audience here, please continue to drop questions or just like additional talking points if you have them. And, we've got 5 or so minutes that we'll keep ripping through them. There's one question from Andrea here asking whether or not we think that machine learning is like a new way of searching and interacting with data, and like how AI can learn and apply these algorithms. And she's wondering if we think that whether everything that's currently in a database will likely be just like searchable through these AI models and machine learning. And it reminds me of what you were just describing with like company ontologies, Lior, where you're using AI to like parse through context throughout an organization. Does that resonate?
Right. Yeah. It's like, that's kind of like a problem that I'm taking from the analytics world. Like I have like a lot of other data leaders. I have this dream where a lot of those anecdotal and directional questions that are coming to my data team won't necessarily need to go through someone that manually knows how to write a SQL. Like, why can't it be just like some place where you can just like throw in a question just in plain English, and something does behind the scenes the conversion into understanding which tables or schemas are relevant to answer that question, inject more context to it, and let kind of like an LLM wrap up an answer. The challenges there are a lot about like the ambiguity that exists within a data model. Human beings are difficult. We have different perspectives and different experiences. And if I'll challenge everyone on the call to try and model, a product into a data model, we would get like, 100 different type of like answers. And now when we challenge an LLM to go and figure out which table is the right one, which column is the right one, that's a difficult kind of thing to do. I think there's going to be, again, I'm guessing, and I don't know, I would be lying to say if I know how to get there, but I have a feeling that there'll be a day when the data model not necessarily is going to be something that human beings model. We would model the data specifically for LLMs, which will bear for a completely different approach, which will reduce that level of ambiguity and potentially introduce more of those kind of type of solutions. But that goes also into, like not necessarily tables within a schema and a database, to go into like unstructured data overall and different documents. Right. It's a fascinating kind of like problem to solve for sure.
Yeah, like we saw the rise of vector DBs and, companies like Pinecone and Weaviate rise, and that's kind of a result of that. But it sounds like you're saying that could just be the beginning. Like there might be totally new ways of modeling and persisting data that makes it easier for LLMs to interact with. That's cool.
Yep.
Okay, these next couple questions are all in the world of evals. So I will say, let's see, we've got Murari and Dylan. if you're interested in this sort of topic, like please join us next week where we're going to go real deep throughout the entire session on evals and talking about LLM as a judge and all that good stuff. But I guess as a teaser, I'm curious to, Pratik and Lior, how to get your take. Like, we've talked about a lot about prototyping and bringing ideas and validating them, but just to give a teaser for next week, like how do you guys think about evaluating AI and ensuring that these AI models are following like fair or ethical guidelines as they become more commonplace in decision making?
I can take this one. So we basically, make sure that whenever we go and actually use some of the data to actually recommend a customer take an action, we look at the statistical significance of the type of data that we have. Like, for example, if we don't have enough representation of a certain industry, or we don't have enough representation of a certain state, and so on, if you look at it from a geographical perspective, we would take that into consideration and either consider synthetic data there, or just like won't introduce that feature to start with. So that's like one aspect of it. So this is like that's literally just like the data practitioner instincts that you should including when you build those kind of recommendation engines. Then we run evals to actually have a predefined expected result, and we would run evals on Vellum to actually test what was the output versus what was the expected output, and see how far is it. And when I'm saying how far is it, sometimes just using similarity score and just like how close the answer was to the vector representation of the answer. Help me out, Pratik. What else are we doing there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we're doing on that testing portion. Like we already mentioned, making sure that there's outputs that we expect to be there, LLM as a judge, ensuring bias. Human in the loop is also really important where we incorporate the human feedback, like we already mentioned for each of our projects, and we'll continue to pipe that back into the test suites that we're using in Vellum today, so that we're continually making sure it's not only automated test suites, but we're also incorporating real human feedback. So there's a variety of those that we're doing, and we're really excited to explore that as well as Vellum builds that out into your guys' platform.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. And, when it comes to evals, again, we'll talk about this a ton next week, but for those of you that want to start thinking about it, the first recommendation I would have is, once again, think about how you as a human would determine whether or not the output is good or bad. Like, you're probably not giving it some holistic good or bad criteria. You're probably thinking about it in a couple different dimensions. Like, is it striking the right tone of voice? Is it factually correct? Did it, comply with our internal like legal guidelines? Like, try to break down your criteria for what good versus bad is across these like discrete different criteria. And then, ideally you invest in a tool like Vellum or others to help encode your thinking, either deterministically with code or with AI, to grade your outputs across those different discrete dimensions. But once again, if you can't put pen to paper to take out of your head like how you as a human grade a response, like chances are the AI is not going to be able to. But a lot more on that next week. Cool. Well, Pratik, Lior, thank you so much for joining. I'm just going to drop the slide here. It's been such a pleasure having you both. For everyone here in the audience, please feel free to continue the conversation with us. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn. We have our QR codes here. And let's see. What else am I supposed to say? Just a reminder, we'll send you an email with some slides, the recording, all that good stuff. And yeah, that's it. Next week, Wednesday, we have session 2 at 1 p.m. Eastern. So that's September 25th. We'll be talking about building trust in your AI systems. And Sebastian Lozano from Redfin will be joining us. A couple months ago, they launched Ask Redfin, which is an AI chatbot on iOS for talking to an AI and getting details about properties in the Redfin app. Really, really cool stuff. Evals was a huge part of what they had to build out. And yeah, it'll be a good one that you don't want to miss. There, Pratik, thanks again. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you for having us.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.